They matter because our children are our most precious legacy. And if we can't help our children in the most traumatic of situations, it seems to me that we failed. I started with the judge, I went to social workers, I went to a number of people that were in the system that were working with children, and I was so concerned about it, and they kept saying, well, you know, we aren't doing a very good job.
I walked towards the area where I was to see this little girl, and she was about a 5-year-old, as I recall, and she was sitting in front of a desk with the detective dressed in uniform behind. On both sides of her were other desks with other detectives interviewing other people for a variety of things. One was a witness to a homicide, as I recall, another was a burglary suspect, and this little girl was seated on that chair, and she was scared to death. And she was not able to say anything. And so the concern was, we think that she was abused, but how do we put a case together if she can't talk to us? The hope was that you could conduct one interview by a trained and experienced investigator, whether it was a DCFS investigator or a police officer, and that interview would be videotaped, and then you wouldn't have to do it again, so they'd only have to tell that story once.
We finally came down to the issue that this is probably the best thing, and the important thing was that the police felt it was, the district attorney's office felt it was, and the critical parties, they were the ones that had to feel good about this.
I was sitting in a committee meeting that I had no association with, and just happened to be there when Greta presented a video to the committee about the center in Huntsville and how they had taken a lovely old home, and we were familiar with the area, and had taken this almost antebellum style home and converted it into a warm and caring environment to where children could be helped rather than just interviewed.
Myself and Senator Peterson both were looking at this and saying, you know what, we've got to convince at least 38 of our colleagues in the House and 15 of our colleagues in the Senate and one man downstairs that this is a better way to do it.
And so we talked about it, and I know I really, personally and as a lawyer, I've seen that trauma. I do criminal defense work, and I've seen what children go through. So I was really excited about the program. She indicated she had talked to Senator Craig Peterson. He was going to carry the bill, and I said, I'll do all I can to help him.
I think the real thing was, for me, was seeing no one questioned anybody's politics. We only questioned, will this work? Will this provide a better service for the children? And when you take that approach, politics doesn't matter.
It was that lighthouse in a storm. I don't know what I would have done without it. I don't know how things would have gone. I daresn't think of how they would have gone if there wouldn't have been some place like the center to handle the situation the way that it was handled. Practically every county has a center, and every one of these centers, private money has been raised in that town, in that county, to do what has to be done so that the plea to the legislature is valid. And I think it's just absolutely amazing what has happened, the way it has grown. But I think as people became more and more educated, it was clear that this was the program that needed to happen so that we could handle this issue.
It's remarkable and tremendously impressive that in such a short period of time, if you really think about it, for a grassroots movement especially, that there's been this dramatic growth of Utah CJCs. And I think it really speaks to the community involvement as well as the commitment of the Utah Attorney Generals to this model and the county attorneys to this model. It has been so incredibly impressive. I can't think of another state that's grown as dramatically in such a short period of time.
I think our centers have been very well run. I think the work that's been done here has helped spread the concept all around the country, and we've been very open and sharing in everything that we do, and we've been happy to take advice and help from others as well.
I don't think we can ever measure the value we brought to children who've been through this traumatized event and now are not as traumatized further because of what the center does.
The healing process really begins in the centers as they're warmly received, as these trained people can reach out to parents, to children, and begin to embrace and help them begin the healing.
I know there's thousands of kids, unfortunately, that have had to deal with this and go through the center, and I'm glad that there's this haven for them. And not only for the young victims, but for the parents and for everybody who is involved.
My hope for Children's Justice Centers in Utah is that we will not lose the vision of what created it. The idea of a partnership between the community, with volunteers, with state support, with community support. That model makes the Children's Justice Center work.
Personally, I think it's the most important public thing I've ever done. My family is most important to me, and I've had the opportunity to be involved very much with the University of Utah and Harvard University, but this has been the most important because I can see the difference that it's made.